Oh, there he is. Hey, Sean, how you doing, bud?
Good, good to see you.
Thanks for talking to me on a Sunday.
Dude, thank you for having me. You kidding me? I'll talk to anybody.
Well, I know. Here's your book. I had to go to so many different Barnes and Nobles here in Las Vegas. Everybody was sold out, so I traveled 20 miles to get your book, my friend.
Oh my God, dude. Thank
And
you so
I'm halfway through it. You know, I'm a slow reader. It's fascinating, and I know we can't discuss if we saw the movie. We can't discuss. I mean, they're very strict. We can't say if we're going to, if we don't. So that's another matter.
Okay.
But this is such a great read so far. You know, you're just the ultimate fan. I love not only you read it from a fan's perspective, but also from a journalist. You know, because it's such great research you did on this. So, and this story reminds me of that classic artist versus studio story of Terry Gilliam and Brazil. I don't know if you know
Yeah,
that.
that's a good one.
That's a great book too. And so for Fan Campaign for years to Warner Brothers, right? So tell me about how the fans made this all happen.
I mean, they would not stop demanding, to see this version of a movie that you got to remember, like if you're, whatever your fandom is, whether it's DC or whether it's Zack Snyder, there's always been some type of film that we couldn't wait to see. You could see over my shoulder, the two Avengers films, Infinity War and Endgame. Those were one of the most anticipated films for that fan base. And for DC fans, it was seeing the first live action Justice League. And when that movie came out in 2017, it wasn't the movie that they were promised. That it wasn't Zack Snyder's vision. Zack Snyder had to walk away from that film back in 2017 due to a family tragedy. And he got replaced by, which this was weird too at the time, like he got replaced by the guy, Joss Whedon, who was doing Avengers films for the competition across the street. So
behind you, right behind you,
yeah, right. And on a Hollywood level, everything about it was weird. It was weird to see Zack Snyder leave a blockbuster. It was weird to see him get replaced by Joss Whedon. And then for the movie to be as bad as it was, the fandom immediately came back home and got on social media and started to go over all the existing trailers and all the footage to say, like, what happened to this movie that we were supposed to see? And there was enough visual evidence and there was enough stuff on social media that they could point to say, like, we didn't get the version that we thought we were going to get. Now that can go away, after a short amount of time, after the fans sort of try to piece that together and the studio denies it and it disappears. But what was kind of amazing about this also was how much Zack Snyder kind of fed the movement as well too, and stoked that flame and said, like, no, I have a version. Because
when did it go from urban legend to, hey, there is a director's cut out there? When did it actually was he allowed to say something like that?
This has been a 3-year period from 2017 to kind of now. And really right up until 2019, the people in the movement who believed in the existence of the cut were still being told by people in the know, journalists, studio people, that the cut doesn't exist. There's no way it could exist. And it really was like July or August of 2019 that Zack Snyder finally sent out a photograph of the film canisters and with a caption that said, like, is it real? Does it exist? Of course it does. And it had Zack Snyder's Justice League label across it. And that's all this fan base needed. Like, that was the fuel to the fire that just got them going.
But that wasn't the 4-hour version that we're getting on the 16th on HBO Max, though.
No, that was like a 214-minute version. 214 was a very specific number to the group. But now this 4-hour cut is coming. And honestly, I think it's only coming because it's HBO Max and it's streaming. If they had to try to get this into a movie theater with the way that COVID has pushed everything back and just the restrictions of trying to get a 4-hour cut into any theater, I don't think it would happen. But the fact that it's a streaming service is going to allow people to just settle in for one long sit if you want, or it's broken up into 6 chapters if you want to stop it every once in a while. So,
well, how much up the food chain the command chain did this have to go at Warner Brothers? Because you have theatrical and streaming, they're two different animals, So did HBO Max say, look, this is a perfect vehicle to get notice of our new streaming service? I mean, how many yes men or how much red tape did Zack Snyder have to go through?
A lot.
I think so, yeah.
It wasn't only just that too, but it was egos of people who had stopped his vision back in 2017. Because you have to sort of look at it into a context. Zack in that moment was building a shared universe that started with Man of Steel, his Superman film with Henry Cavill, and then it continued into Batman versus Superman, and it was going to lead into Justice League. But somewhere along that way, the studio heads who were still in place decided that they were going to go away from the darker and more serious tone of his films and go towards something a little more audience friendly, because they were watching Marvel across the street just crush it from movie to movie, movie after movie. And you know this business more than anybody else. It's box office that drives all of these decisions. And when Batman versus Superman didn't cross $1 billion, when Warner Brothers stepped back and looked at their movie that had Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman together for the first time, and that film didn't cross $1 billion, they decided that they didn't want to keep going down the road that Zack was taking them, wisely or not. So they switched gears, and it really collapsed in on them. So there were still a lot of studio people at Warner Brothers who didn't want to admit that those decisions were a mistake, that they had botched it, but they couldn't ignore the demands of the fan base. I mean, the hashtag release the Snyder Cut was just too loud for too long, and they finally had to acknowledge.
I think those HBO, I think those 3 letters mean more than ever now, home box office, so.
Yeah, very true.
And, the 4-hour plus running time, this is a roadshow epic presentation by all definition. I mean, 2,600 visual shots in 6 months. I mean, that's insanity. How did he pull it off? Just because everybody was working from home, or?
That's a big deal also. Yeah, that helped. But I also think that the movie was probably further along than people gave it credit for. Because he had done most of his, all of his shooting was completed. He had to do a lot of post-production work. This is something I want to ask him if and when I get a chance to sit down with him recently. Like, he knew he had a version of this cut on a laptop. When he left Warner Brothers, he just took it with him, kind of thing. I want to know how often over the past 3 years, he just kind of opened it back up and tinkered on it, and worked on it. Because you've written a lot of stuff, you've edited a lot of stuff. Are you always kind of futzing with it? Don't you always want to just make it a little bit better?
Starting with Superman's mustache, right? that's scene number 1. I mean, that was the worst.
But he knows plenty of people in the business that I'm sure could have just done some visual works for him and done some editing for him. And I think that he probably tinkered with it along this whole line. But then, of course, then he gets the idea that HBO Max gives him money to go back and do additional photography on it. And we're in COVID pandemic. He can't even get his cast together to do it properly. So there's a lot of obstacles for this movie to overcome.
What would they throw, 30 million? How much was the budget for this version?
70 million.
Oh my gosh. I was less than that. That's incredible.
Post-production work. And then he shot some additional scenes that he worked into. A scene that he wanted to include originally that he didn't think he was going to get a chance to do with a bunch of other characters people haven't seen yet. Right.
And now for your book, you had a chance, once it was officially going, you had a chance to sit down with Zack Snyder for this book for an interview?
I did. So the cut got announced on May 20th of 2020. And then he and I sat down in early June and just got to do like a victory lap sort of, what did it mean to you to get the cut announced and what's going to happen from this point on? Jeff, people don't realize, like, I turned this book's manuscript in last July. And so there's a lot of stuff that has happened since that could be a follow-up book, honestly. But I kind of had to get some closure to this story of just like, initially when I was writing it, there was no idea that the cut was going to come. Then it got announced and it gave the book a terrific ending, kind of the best one you could hope for. But now it's like everyone's sort of adapted the restore the Snyderverse. They want him to keep going. And he's been really sort of feeding that along. But my interview with him really celebrated the amount of work that the fans put in, to get this movie released, the amount of stuff he did behind the scenes at Warner Brothers to convince them that like this fandom is so good at marketing, and they branded a slogan, release the Snyder Cut, that's been more powerful than anything you guys have been able to do at the studio here. You should probably employ most of them because they're doing it all for free. This is a fandom that just did it in their own free time for nothing.
Well, this wasn't the time then to ask like some tough questions, because of Cyborg's character and all about how Joss Whedon treated people, or maybe more personal questions about how it affected him with his daughter and all that. This was just about, the fans coming together and getting the movie done. It just wasn't the time and place.
Well, the Ray Fisher stuff hadn't even really surfaced yet.
Right.
That stuff came out. And yeah, those really uncomfortable stories about stuff that happened during the reshoots. It'd be tough to ask Zack about that because he wasn't there for most of that stuff. By that point, he had kind of moved on. We did talk a lot about Autumn, his daughter. So for people who don't know, like the reason Zack left Justice League in the first place in 2017 is because he and his wife lost their daughter, Autumn, and she died by suicide. And so the movement has really adapted the push for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, all of their charitable work and their marketing efforts. They raise money for AFSP at the same time. So Zack did talk a lot about how, at that time, it wasn't the right thing for him to do to keep working on the movie. He needed to be back home with his family. But I love that he's kind of opened up about how much of a comic book geek that Autumn was. And she was the one in the family that really, bonded with him over this stuff. And so finishing this movie and getting it released really was a bit of closure, for the journey and the loss that they went on with their daughter. And so I found that to be really emotionally compelling.
In the news lately, Martin Scorsese, trashing comic book films, making it sound so cheap. Do you think this will be the definitive version for him to watch to see, it's much more than he thinks?
Yeah, we should call this the Irishman of comic book movies, right? Like
absolutely, absolutely.
It is an endeavor. Listen, Scorsese's never going to buy into comic book films. They're just not his thing. But I will say, I anticipate this film to be the most, complete adaptation of a graphic novel, of a comic book story. And, we've seen plenty of these other examples leading up to it, Logan and these two films overhand. But for DC fans, Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Snyder Cut of Justice League, feels like the movie you've been waiting for.
And coming in at 4 hours, there was never discussion of making it a miniseries like The Watchmen, having 4 different episodes, because asking people to watch 4 hours and something minutes, at home, and let alone in the theater, that's pretty demanding.
It really is. And personally, I think it would have been better off for them to release it weekly. Just think about what Marvel has been able to accomplish with WandaVision. Like, it generates a water cooler topic, and everybody kind of knows where you are in the story because you've all watched up to a certain point. That 4-hour sit is going to be great for dedicated diehard DC fans. I think there's going to be plenty of people who, when they get to one of the chapter stops, that they're going to say, let's pause it and catch back up with it, tomorrow. And I'm not quite sure that any filmmaker wants you to be pausing and coming back to their movie later, but that 4-hour ask is a lot, and it is kind of structured in a way that it could be broken up into a sort of episodic breakdown. But from a pop culture standpoint, I think doing it weekly might have been a little bit stronger.
And Cinemablend, your podcast, big score, right? You got Deborah and Zack Snyder coming on?
They are coming on. We're really excited to be able to take a deeper dive into that with them. So Debbie's been so integral as a producer in terms of getting Zack's vision together. Zack has done an amazing thing even before sitting down with press, like all of us, is that he's been going around and visiting live streams that are conducted by the true fans, and he'll sit down and spend an hour with them talking about it. And you don't see a lot of directors who have that interactive nature with their fans, and I think that's great. But yeah, I want to crack at them. I've got a lot of questions I want to ask.
I'll be listening, and in the meantime, everybody pick up your book. It's really fantastic. It's a great compendium to the movie. Sean, thanks so much for joining me today, man. I'm so happy for you because I've been watching you for years, putting this together. Your obsession is finally over. You can take a rest now, because I know it's probably just live and eat and breathe this for the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's true. But Jeff, I really admire everything that you're doing as well, too. Keep it up, brother. You're a great interviewer, and I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks, Sean. Take care. We'll talk soon.